And the first thing I want to put out there, and I should have put out a tweet by now, but we were talking about how Jimmy Butler was right about a lot of stuff, is what the level of concern should be now over the secondary of this team, that Holton Hill has a 4-game suspension. And Courtney, I'm going to give you my quick take on Holton Hill's suspension and what it means, and then you can tell me if you think that I'm overreacting to this. He came in with 1 strike already because he was kicked off of Texas's football team and went undrafted, and reportedly, but I think he confirmed later, tested positive for weed at the combine. So you come in with 1 strike already. Now you get a
He had a diluted sample, right?
Oh, diluted sample. Okay,
which
right.
usually
Right.
he was just thirsty.
Yeah.
He needed a lot of water.
But I think he acknowledged maybe to Tom Pelissero that was an issue for him. And then he gets this 4-game suspension. To me, that's strike 2. And while I like Holton Hill's potential, you cannot pencil him into anything in the future. Anything from here on out that you get from Holton Hill is gravy on top. It's found money, cherry on top, whatever one you want to use. But you can't write him into the future and say this is a guy who could start a corner for us 3 years from now, because you don't know if there's going to be a 3 years from now with Holton Hill because of his recent past. And that, to me, changes the dynamic of how you look at the future of this secondary, whether you saw him as a number 3 or a backup or somebody who's a rotational player or even a potential starter. Whatever you saw him as, you can't look at him the same way anymore now that he's had this suspension and is basically 1 strike away from not being on the team anymore.
This is the risk that they knew they were going to take with a guy like this. And obviously, he was suspended for the PED policy. So we don't know exactly what the issue was there. It has not come out. It's not public information yet. So we don't know if it's another strike with marijuana, or if it is a performance enhancing drug, if it's something, using to have an advantage on the field. Some guys would say that it is weed. I don't know. But the fact of the matter is here, they already took a flyer on a guy like Holton Hill a year ago when they brought him in here. He was a top undrafted college free agent.
Yep.
They knew that's the type of guy you take a flyer on.
Right.
Whatever your thoughts are on the marijuana issue here are kind of to the side. He's a good football player, and it wasn't anything that they thought was too egregious. But now you have a second strike, and regardless of where his ceiling is, this puts the Vikings in a huge bind for the first 4 games of the season where he's not able to play. And I know we talk so much about how they have great cornerback depth. They could even part ways with somebody like Trey Waynes potentially on draft night if they needed more draft capital and if there was a trade that would make sense at the moment. Now I don't think that's even a possibility because of the bind that this puts you in. And it's not just Holton Hill. You take a look at this position group, and there's a lot going on. After this season, you take a look at the futures of Xavier Rhodes, Trey Waynes, who's going to be a free agent, Mackenzie Alexander is going to be a free agent. There's a lot in limbo there. And, in the case of Rhodes, he's getting up there in age. Do we know if he's going to revert back to 2017 form, or if he's going to continue really where he was on the downslide in 2018? And then Mike Hughes is coming off of an ACL surgery. We don't know how long it's going to take for him to come back to form too. So all of a sudden, you have this group where you're like, yeah, we've got 5 guys. We're great. We're in a good position. Now there's a ton of question marks, and this just adds insult to injury, in my opinion, with Holton Hill, because you were relying on him to be able to make that jump in the first place in the second year, which is not a guaranteed thing regardless, but they did like his progression where he was going. And now you have to be without him for 4 games. I think it's interesting to think about in terms of what this does for their draft strategy. I don't think it does much. I think that there will be a corner taken at some point, regardless, just given who this head coach is and the priority he places in his secondary. But it's not a good place for them to be right now.
See, I think it does change it a bit, because I would have said with Holton Hill, it was undrafted last year, but the way he played in year 1, the potential that he has, he was like a 2nd, 3rd round pick type of guy to begin with, if he didn't have that risk. So if he had come in, now remember, Delvin Cook had risk as well. And Delvin Cook has been, as far as we know, just fine and has fit in really well. And there have been no issues whatsoever. So then you look at Dalvin Cook like, wow, you got a first-round prospect and maybe the best running back in that draft or top 3 running backs in that draft for a second-round pick as opposed to a first. So just because of those character issues. And that's the deal that you make there, the risk versus the reward. And with Holton Hill, it would have felt like drafting a corner in the second round. I mean, the guy is 6'2". He's got great length. He's quick. He's physical and played really well. I looked it up on Pro Football Focus. He allowed a 67 quarterback rating into his coverage in the limited time that he played and was able to step in for Xavier Rhodes or Trey Waynes whenever he was asked. So you would have felt like going forward, we'll see how Rhodes' late prime works. Then here you have Mike Hughes, probably an outside corner, and you have Holton Hill, outside corner. Maybe you get Mackenzie Alexander to re-sign, and you're in really good shape going forward. But with Holton Hill now getting the suspension, and you know that you can't plan on him for the future because you don't know if this is going to continue to be an issue, if it's going to turn into some Josh Gordon type of thing where he's suspended and then not suspended and so forth going forward. You now have to make sure you come away with a cornerback, where you and I have been draft simming for a while, and we've sometimes looked at them in the third round and sometimes not. Now, every time I draft sim going forward, in the first 3 rounds, I'm looking at corners, not in the first, but second and third. I think you need somebody else coming. And as far as the beginning of the season goes, well, nobody better get hurt in camp, because we don't know what Mike Hughes' timeline is. Remember, we were told all last offseason, Pat Elflein will be back anytime soon.
Yeah,
Week
4 months later.
Right. And then, so even Latavius Murray, where they said, he'll be ready for camp in 2017, and he wasn't. And then it took 4 or 5 weeks for him to get back to full speed. And when he did, he was great, but it took a while. With Mike Hughes, it might be that same issue. For when he got hurt, it might take him a while to get back up to full speed.
And even when he's at full speed, it might take him a while to play to where he was showing that potential last year. I mean, these guys backpedal. They move side to side. That's tough for a corner coming off of an ACL injury, I think, at any level, in any part of your career. So, I mean, there's so many question marks with this group. And yes, they do have the numbers, but can you really, given each guy, I'm looking at kind of the depth chart of the 90 man right now. I mean, behind Holton Hill, who if you're going to put him basically as like the 5th corner there, you've got Jalen Myrick and Craig James.
My guy, Craig James. I'm going to start calling him right now, my guy, Craig James.
Okay.
Is that okay?
That's fine with me, but do you know if he can play?
No, I don't.
Okay.
He was pretty good in preseason.
Congratulations.
And
thank you.
And
I knew this was coming.
I thought that he had a chance to make the team. He didn't, but they brought him back.
Yeah.
And
he was on the active roster to end the season, too, because they had depth concerns.
But I don't look at him as any sort of sure thing that he's even going to be on the team. I just liked him a little bit in training camp and wouldn't go any farther than that. So now if you're talking about, let's just say, a scenario here for the first couple weeks of the season, you either have a Mike Hughes that isn't up to 100% yet coming off of his injury, or is still making progress learning how to play the position in the NFL, because last year he had flashes, but he also had down moments in his few games as well. So you're essentially talking about a redshirt rookie season. So he's got to kind of start from scratch there for actual playing time. And Holton Hill is not there. And you have Xavier Rhodes, who has this recent history of injuries, and Trey Waynes, who also had 2 concussions last year, I believe.
Mm-hmm.
Like, you feel on very rocky ground with the secondary. And to me, that leads to you have to bring in somebody else, because at one point last year, they were playing, I think Jaron Kearse was playing corner on the outside, Marcus Sherrills. And now even your safety blanket, Marcus Sherrills, is playing for the New Orleans Saints. So you don't even have that experienced guy who in a pinch can come in.
Well, I tend to think this is also going to be another test for Mike Zimmer and how creative he's going to get with his defensive backs. Like, remember when we saw the big nickel experiment with Jaron Kearse? You mentioned him. I mean, how many 3 safety sets are we going to start seeing out there? And can they even do that right now? Because they literally have 3 safeties: Harrison Smith, Anthony Harris, and Jaron Kearse. So that's why I thought, in going back to some of my draft sims that I've done the last few weeks, is why I'm taking a 2nd round safety if there's one there that I like. But I still don't think that as the Holton Hill issue is on the table right now, that doesn't fix anything. I mean, the secondary is one of the strongest groups on this team. And now there's a lot of holes that you can easily pick through.
So